Hello, everyone. I'm excited to welcome Alex Lubyansky to the M&A Profits Lessons from the Trenches podcast. Alex is a Michigan-based M&A attorney and entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience. He's the founder and managing partner of Acquisition Stars, PLLC, boutique law firm specializing in business acquisitions, exit plannings, and private equity. Alex combines his legal expertise with an entrepreneurial mindset shaped by his own ventures. Uniquely, Alex is also a seasoned professional sports executive. Well, that's worth a conversation in itself. He has been CEO, GM, and head coach of pro soccer teams, including Gold Star FC Detroit, where he managed international club acquisitions. His dual career gives him exceptional operational insights that informs his legal work. Alex is a recognized thought leader sharing M&A strategies through webinars, articles, and podcasts. And we are very grateful to have him on here today. So welcome, Alex. Thank you so much for coming along today.
Craig, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's terrific. Now, what I did not say is Michigan. So that's top of the US up there. And we've met before, we've caught up before and had some great conversations. And the very first thing that I did after that call was to introduce you to someone else from Michigan as well. Does that happen a lot when you deal with people? Do you meet people and they instantly go off and try and add value by introducing you to other people or giving you access to some information that might be useful to you? Do people do that? Or is that just something that I do?
There is a particular subset of people who have this connectivity, and I tend to enjoy my time with said people more than others. It's a superpower, and when you find someone who is able to do that and add value in that way, certainly on my end, it's something that I appreciate greatly and I'm very grateful for. So while not common, when you find it, it's something that you sort of hang on to, and it's something you try to reciprocate. So I very much appreciate that you were able to find someone in such a remote part of the world as where you're located, and it certainly went noticed.
That's good. The reason that I bring that subject up is because I did a podcast a couple of days ago and I'm never going to release it because what I found was that the person that I did the podcast with, and I should have taken note of the little red light on my forehead the first time that I met them and the second time that I met them, that it seemed transactional to them rather than a gift, rather than something that you can both work on together. And 2025 for me wasn't the year for political correctness. I decided that wasn't the year. 2026, by the way, isn't looking any good for that either, by the way. So just a note for you. Note. But I think my new theme for 2026 is I think that it's got to be more a giving relationship as well. So I think I've gone to a lot of effort to actually add value to a lot of people over the last year. But I think 2026, I'm going to make a concerted effort to work with people that are also in a giving mindset rather than a transaction, because I don't treat my relationships as transactional.
You're going to have a much more enjoyable year if you chase that mentality. What I can say personally is I've generally stayed away from anything that is a simple box mentality. And within law, what's difficult is really there's two of them. There's litigation and there's transactional. And boy, do I hate being called a transactional attorney, even though if you had to name me something, you would. It's the right type of law. I don't love going to court and going to war, which is litigation. But man, I don't like being called a transactional attorney.
Well, that's an interesting way to start a podcast, but it does lead perfectly into, as you said, the law side of things and the M&A side of things, because it is about the relationships. And you've got to go into these with a giving attitude and a sharing attitude, because you do have two competing bodies, both in uncertainty as to how things are going to work out, because you might have a great plan, but until the first shot's fired, you don't know how that plan's going to work out. So I think it is quite relevant to this conversation. So how do you identify those relationships? Because you've got that sporting background, so you know how teams work, you know from a coaching perspective, but you've also done the contracting side of sports as well. So you've got that whole thing covered, and you're a litigator as well.
So a lot of life experience has led me to find overlaps between different fields and how you can live a fulfilled life by learning from all of it. And for me, selection, both player selection and client selection, they're so perfectly analogous to one another. And the way I view it is I'm never really being interviewed or vice versa. It's a conversation. And if there's an overlap of more than just an objective, but an alignment as to how to get there, that's a good relationship. You can get to a result, but the process is so unpleasant that it's just not worth getting to that result together with someone. So there is this screening that invariably should happen in relationships on the front end to save both of you anguish, because there's simply people that don't fit with other archetypes, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. To me, the mistake is going through a lifetime of experience and failing to think about what those are, what you align really well with versus what you do not, because then you can start to have a more pleasant 2026 like you're talking about, Craig. And you can start to chase those relationships that are going to give you joy, because again, the end result, sure, but there's many ways to get to a right result that just ruin the whole thing.
You are talking again about and how those two bodies work together. It reminds me of a podcast, and it is one of my favorite podcasts that I've done. It was the 8th podcast that I did. So I do recommend that people go back and watch the 8th podcast. I'm not going to tell you what happens at the 30th minute, but I can tell you that in the first 10 seconds, I tell you there's a mic drop moment coming, and it really does hit at the 30th minute. Episode 8, and it was Katrina, and we talked there about people and relationships and how when you go into an organization in an M&A, it's all about those relationships and building those. So I do recommend people go back and look at that one. You will learn a lot from that. And wait around for that 30th minute. It'll be worth it, I promise you. But I go back to one that I did for an aged care facility, and it was a carve out of an aged care facility to another organisation. The project management team for the other organisation obviously weren't that greatly experienced. They needed a lot of guidance. I was on the vendor's side, they were on the buyer's side, but it worked out that I did a lot of the planning for them as well. Why? Because we both had the same goal. We wanted to achieve the carve out from one to another. How that happened, it didn't really matter. It just needed to happen, and we had to cooperate to get it done. Now, in this, I wrote down a list of tasks that needed to be done. I put in a column for the dates, and I put in the dates as to when these needed to be done and who would do it. Now, there was one down the bottom that I left no date and the buyer's project team to complete, and that was the return of a whole heap of IT hardware that they were never going to use. They were going to take it out and throw it out and put their own stuff in, because this was all specially configured for the vendor. It took 2 weeks, but they put a date in that column, and that became part of the project plan. Now, this was an asset purchase. The buyer got everything. Lock, stock and barrel, everything. However, on cutover day, I went out there just to bring out some pastries and make them feel welcome, that sort of stuff. And it's a part of the relationship, isn't it? So I always do that for my project teams. And at the front door, I found 2 boxes of IT equipment. $230,000 worth of equipment that I stuck in the boot of my car that they gave me as a gift because they filled out that date in that column that I've filled out there. They were pleased to do it because I had been so helpful to them, and they were never going to use it anyway. They were pleased to help me put it in the boot of the car because of building that relationship, because of giving and giving and giving and helping them.
Beautiful
So,
story.
yes, I think we have to build, we can't always be there for the taking. We've got to be there for the giving, but that giving has to be reciprocal as well. It can't be just one way. Let me get into the grilling side of things, Alex, here, okay? We're going to put you under the pressure here now. You're a lawyer. You do M&As. This is called M&A, Lessons from the Trenches. Tell me a war story. What have you got up your sleeve? Well, okay, let me help you out then. Tell me something about where you were closing a deal in the sports arena and it didn't look as though it was going to happen. And then you were able to do a turnaround on it.
Quite a few, quite a few.
I
On the
figured as
sports
much.
side, on the sports side, and specifically within football or soccer, if you will, generally speaking, the thesis that I have put together and the targets that I chase are so academically interesting because I look for a very concrete reaction during diligence that is so counterintuitive and so against the way that many deals run in other industries. And the reaction I look for, and you'll laugh, is why on God's green earth are you even interested in this club? When I hear that, I experience a tremendous amount of validation because that is very much what I am looking for. And that is very much in line strategically with the type of club that is rife with opportunity to be run a specific way for a specific purpose and to actually generate a play that can last for a long time. Much of sport investment is based around hyperinflated valuations. Sports is a strange industry in that you're not dealing with EBITDA most of the time. You're dealing with a multiple of revenue, and the actual business is burning cash like you would not believe. And much of it is predicated on this thought that somebody, for often an egotistical purpose, wants to look very, very cool holding on to that asset and to get into a room that they otherwise couldn't gain access to. I am not interested in those models. I'm aware that they exist, and I don't want to be labeled as someone who thinks that something that exists is in any way inferior. It is not. It's just not my thesis. So when I
Your buy
hear,
box, so to speak.
why on earth would you want to buy that? It validates that the asset that we are after is not very well understood, and it's not something that will even look cool if you do buy it, which is a great screening tool. So there have been a number where that has come up, and it has led to a tremendous success story because that was identified, that was experienced, that was validated. And then the process revealed that, yes, this is very much the sort of club, organization, infrastructure that might not generate a ton of headlines or might not be great cannon fodder for a conversation at a pub, but you can really build something special. So going back to your question, those instances are what I chase when I'm involved in a deal. Not retained to do a standard deal, but when I'm really, really involved and I'm not just the attorney, but I'm also going to become the operator, that's what we look for.
I think one of the things that I got from that was you said egotistical. In that arena, surely it's ego all the way through, which is not unlike the M&A side of things as well. Because on the M&A side of things, you've got the C-suite, which have ego involved, and quite often not a lot of experience to go with that ego on the M&A side of things. The C-suite might have done one, maybe two M&As in their careers, in contrast to you and I, which have done quite a few over the years. So then, but they do run on that ego side of things, and that leads to bad implementation strategies, which leads to not achieving the initial goals of that acquisition. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. And I would also go back to our earlier conversation. Not only leads to those things, but the ride along the way is very unpleasant. And when you're
Mhm.
having a conversation with someone on the front end and you're setting expectations and you're coming up with a structure, every deal is completely different. It has to be by definition. You can't have a cookie cutter approach in this field. It doesn't work. You need to screen for that as much as you possibly can. And you're going to get it wrong. God knows I have. But if you screen for it on the front end, you can mitigate the risk of having a very, very unpleasant ride. And over the years, I have gotten better. I will never be perfect, but I constantly think about, is this person someone that I want to be in constant contact with for a number of months? And if the answer is a clear no, no matter how lucrative that engagement might be, no matter how prestigious that engagement might be, it's a hard no for me at this part of my life.
Well, I have been involved with project work now for 39 years. I had to do the maths twice then because I didn't realize I was that old. But anyway, for 39 years, I have only done one successful project, successful to the time frame, to the budget. I personally haven't been on the side of a deal that has failed, but there is a difference between failure and absolute success where you've got the time frame, the budget, everything right. Only once. And I've got to say, I don't expect it will ever happen again. It's because they're all different and you've just got to accept that. You put together a good plan and then you go with it and you have to be flexible. Okay, there was something that I did want to talk about, and one of your mission statements, one of your thing that your business highlights is that you close deals. What makes you so special that you close deals? And should you be closing deals?
Well, it's nuanced. What you brought up there, I think, is a fairly simple marketing play. Close deals. The way that an engagement really should be structured, and the way that boutiques can be successful and really should be, is to differentiate from, let's just say, big law, for example. The way that you would structure an engagement in this space. If you're talking about purely making it from a business perspective as an attorney, a lucrative engagement for yourself, very transactional in nature, Craig, like you have said in the past, really what you want to do is not close a deal. And what you want to do is bill as many hours as humanly possible at as high of a rate as possible. That from a strictly transactional purview is a ravishing success. If that's what you do and that's all you're after, and there are people, and great, it's not about closing a deal. It's about generating legal fees. So if you had to pick one or the other in the world of simple boxes, that I try not to, but let's say you do, sure, I would say closing deals is more important. Now let's talk about getting there along the way. How do you structure it so that you stay within ethical guidelines? Of course, you don't want to be incentivized as an attorney to close deals, because that's an ethical area that you don't want to get into. That's incorrect. You shouldn't have any kind of third party or anything that could even be pointed at to say, you know what, this is not independent legal judgment. This is chasing dollars. And if closing deals directly leads to some sort of inflated payment to the attorney, that can often be an issue. So not only am I avoiding the trap of, hey, I'm just going to rack up my billable hours as high as humanly possible, which I don't do. But then from a structuring perspective, I'm thinking about, how do you make this as pleasant as possible for the person on the other end that I actually do want to spend my time with, where there are stages to this process and there is an intelligible pathway where on the front end, not only are we aligned as human beings, but we're aligned from an incentive purview. How do we analyze this deal? That's step one. And there should be a much lower fee for that first phase where whether or not you move forward into any sort of definitive drafting, if you structure that on a flat fee basis, that's a win for a client relationship for a number of reasons. They're not allergic to picking up the phone and calling you because you're not running the taxi meter, if you will. That's important. But you're also not incentivized to get to a close because that's also a mistake. So finding a way to make every stage of this process as clearly articulated, well-defined in scope, priced with certainty is a win. And that's how my firm operates. So we are interviewing each other. And if we have that alignment, we have it all the way through from the very beginning of the process to the end with stages in between. It cannot be, in my view, from my experience, one single, hey, this is what it's going to cost, because then you are really, really messing with the ability to have independent judgment, and you don't want to do that. So that's how my firm structures things. I'm very happy with it. Clients are as well. And hopefully that answers the question as far as, you know, you had to sort of pick an angle. We picked closing deals, sure. But it's really attempting to think about what's going to help the person on the other end have success, have competent guidance throughout, have a relationship that down the line, if there's another target, they call you again. Those things are all very important. If they're not thought through and they're not honest and they're not put together in the way that I just described, I think there's a lot of ways that this could go wrong. And I've lived them from the other side, not being the attorney. I really try to think about the entire picture so that the relationship is as pleasant as possible. And the outcome, whether or not there is a closing, is the correct outcome.
And the industry is pretty small, even in America. You talk about Michigan being your pool of area there. So even in America, it's a small industry. If you start screwing about people, word will get out and it'll come back and bite you. There was a second part to that question. You might have just missed it there at the end. Closing deals, and should you? Should you close those deals? So should every deal be closed? Now, I'm in a total hypocritical mood on this one, by the way, because I'm also of the other opinion of, are lawyers interfering with closing deals? Are they just spoil sports as well? Do they just get in the way sometimes? So, as I said, I'm in a bit of a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other side of things there.
Yeah, I mean, you could on either end of it experience something that is unpleasant. You could have an attorney who is too eager to close, or you could have an attorney who is too repulsed by the idea of a closing. And in there, often, if you had to simplify it down to one thing, it's aligning incentives on the front end and understanding incentives on the front end and making sure that what you're getting is competent legal guidance, but you can make the ultimate business decision. If the ultimate business decision is let's go, I'm aware of all of these risks. You've done a great job, counsel, of painting the risks for me, but myself, business person, client, still wants to go through with it. A great deal attorney will find a way to structure it in the optimal way, and they will empower you to do so. An amateur one would simply say no because X, and it's over. And I believe both of those to be dangerous. What you're really looking for is an actual trusted advisor, an actual role where they empower you, they educate you, but within most cases, you are allowed to go forward, whether it's, is this an APA or an SPA, whether it's, hey, this liability really is a grenade, and this liability I've seen 100 times before, and it's not a big deal. Those are the little nuances and the little bits and pieces of a deal where if you don't have that relationship and you don't have that trust, it becomes a very, very unpleasant process. And if you've structured that legal engagement the wrong way on the front end, read your engagement letter. My God, please read your engagement letter, because a lot of the time you're going to have this massive, let's say it is a flat fee, but it's not even tied to any sort of milestone or any sort of performance. You might have just forfeited your entire legal fee because they drafted a killer engagement letter. What a business, right? Boy, does that suck. And you almost need counsel to review other counsel's engagement letters at times.
Not at times. Absolutely you do. Absolutely you do. Now, fortunately, I've got a bit of some legal experience to fall upon. But have you ever, when you take out a retainer with a lawyer, have you ever got a retainer back? Because there's
Me?
been some
Well,
component.
before I
No,
was
but
a
there's been
lawyer
some
myself,
component.
that's a great question.
They
I've
always
given
somehow
retainers
use up the
back
whole container.
as the attorney, but I sit in both seats, right? And have I ever gotten a retainer back? That's a great question. And I don't want to sell anyone short, so I'm really thinking about it. But it's almost
It's
like
miraculous.
they find a way to spend it, right? So if you've paid it, they'll find a way to spend it. It's an outdated model. It's a very difficult model.
It is, and AI is changing everything. I was
Sure.
chatting with a couple of lawyers here in Australia yesterday, and they were telling me that they're now getting clients come back to them and say, hey, I want to see how much AI has saved you in doing the work. So I want to bill for the AI component, and I want to see how that's reduced our overall bill. I said to the lawyers yesterday, well, I tell them to go get nicked. It's none of their business. That's my business on how much it's saving me. The most important thing is that they're getting the quality of the work, and they're getting the AI is allowing them to take the time to, instead of, and here we go back to that word again, transactional, rather than doing transactional work, they're now able to do thought process work and give extra value in that way. So, yes, the retainer, I've just never seen anyone get a part of their retainer back at all. Lawyers tend to use it all somehow.
Yeah, they find a way.
Amazing. But I want to go back to this word transactional has popped up so many times in this conversation. So I want to go back to your actual product selection, if I could please. You literally in your product selection, you have transactional legal services for M&A deals. And you've got 4 different products there: mergers and acquisitions, elite partnership, strategic partnership, premium architecture, and value maximization. By the way, you spelled maximization with a Z, but I'll forgive you for that, okay? So you've got those products, and you've already outlined how those products work, but you've definitely broken it down into different components that people can go to and say, okay, I want this. And you can advise, okay, this is probably the best model for you. Does that help your customers understand and get clarity?
It does. It does. These are frameworks, and frameworks are useful, but nothing can replace an interaction like the one that you and I are sharing right now. So every deal is different. Every deal team is different. Industry, deal size, sophistication of the client. And you need to present a solution that is beneficial to that client, that is after a conversation. So no one's going to sign on to my website and choose one of those 4 and say, give that to me. And if they did, it would
Why
be
not? I wish they'd do that for me.
it
It'd just
would,
be so much easier.
it would be a huge mistake to do it that way anyway. And we wouldn't have the opportunity to have the conversation. Without the conversation, again, it's a two-way consultation is a two-way conversation. And I have turned clients away. And you should. You really should. If you lead a meaningful life, there have to be folks that just don't fit your model, and vice versa. And that's okay, but it's better to figure that out in a 30-minute conversation than over the course of 9 miserable months together. So again, those are on the website. Those are great ways for someone to start thinking about which of these is more interesting and why. And it leads to and then after a conversation, there can be, all right, this is how we'll move forward. I'll handle all of it. I'll handle part of it. Here's who you're already bringing. Here's who I might bring with me. And you put together a customized package that everyone's excited about, and then you move forward and you can't do this without a relationship. You really can't. If you could, then someone would just hop on ChatGPT and type in the deal terms. And I'm not even saying that that's impossible. I have no idea. I've never, tried to
No, it is
go on
possible.
there and
Absolutely.
create all of the docs that way, but that's not the secret sauce. That's not what you're signing up for. You're signing up for an actual solution, an actual human being that wants to be there with you throughout this process. And who knows, maybe in 10 years, even you and I talking, one of us might be some sort of an AI visual of the person recreated. But right now, the human element is so, so important. And while AI is an incredible tool, it can't replace what we're doing here just yet.
No, it can't. We do need to wrap this up, but I've got more questions coming. One of the key things that you do, you talk about that relationship, you talk about that guidance, but I can't afford to have a lawyer on retainer that I know that retainer is going to be used up every time I put them on retainer. You have another service that you offer, which is a growing industry in actual fact, and that is the fractional employment. So you do fractional general counsel services. Why did that come about?
Fantastic solution. So if you look at, the growth of a company, at some point they're faced with this decision of, do I bring on my first in-house counsel? And some companies do, and sometimes that legal department grows, and at certain sizes, it makes a whole lot of sense. But those early days, if there is someone who is competent, who is well diversified in their breadth of experience, that can be a cost-effective solution for you, that isn't a burden to your payroll and isn't, it all comes back to incentive, Craig. If you hire an in-house counsel on a salary, suddenly they have a brand new incentive, which is to do as little as possible
You know I've seen that before, don't you?
and to push for a raise every year, baby. There's your W-2 in-house model. And what an incentive. So fractional or OGC or however you package it is an incredible solution where somebody gets to know, a competent attorney gets to know your business inside and out. You don't have to bring them up to speed every time. You don't have to go through hiring or interviewing or, I'm going to grab this up. So they almost run your legal department, if you will, completely themselves. And if you align on the front end as far as what does that look like? How many hours per month? What are the services that are included? What are the services that you would then have to go to market for? It's almost like you're hiring someone at a fraction of the cost of an in-house who is incentivized to do a good job, because you cut them off and it's over and it's fine. But if they do great, they can run your legal spend. They can do it themselves, or if it is something that requires specialization, they probably are quite a bit better at hiring someone for a specific purpose than you would be as a business owner who didn't go to law school, who doesn't have a network of those folks. So it's an incredible solution for companies in the SMB space that really is the best of both worlds, and is another kind of emerging solution that when I first was entering the world as an entrepreneur, I didn't see it out there in the market. And now I do. I see a good number of attorneys offering OGC services, and I think it's fantastic. I applaud those willing to think of how our industry can start to reshape itself, because candidly, I sort of went to law school because I was sick of hiring bad lawyers. It was so common that you would end up spending so much money for someone that just didn't care and strictly wanted to milk the clock. And I figured if I just went and learned and got my degree and had it there, at some point it would make sense. And here we are. And I think a lot of attorneys that have wide experiences and do more than strictly practice law are exactly the type that can be so effective in this specific space. And I love those attorneys. I love when I come across them. They just have a different sort of mentality and desire to be helpful and to, once again, enjoy their time. I love what I do. And it's, I think, kind of rare that someone can say that. So I'm very fortunate to have ended up somehow, no pun intended, merging soccer and law. I, I don't know how I did it. I wouldn't advise either of my kids to follow my pathway. It's too crazy, but man, it's so satisfying and so fulfilling.
Well, I've got to tell you two quick stories based on what you just said there. The first one was an in-house lawyer. I was doing a project and we had to go off and get some legal advice. Had to go and see the in-house lawyer. So the project director and I went off and we had our meeting with the in-house lawyer. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm writing notes." She said, "No." She said, "There'll be no note taking here. There's no record of this conversation." Why the hell am I talking with a lawyer if I'm not? Okay. So we eventually came out of this meeting and the project director looked at me and he said, "Craig," he said, "are my eyes bleeding?" He said, "It's just a painful, horrible experience." But exactly what you described there.
Amazing.
The second one was, I wanted to tell you about a chat that I had with Hugh Hilton from the Hilton Hotel family. He is involved with M&A, is a genius, absolute genius on the side. And I was having a bit of a chat with him, and he was telling me about when he, and it goes back to you, why you became a lawyer. And he was in a boardroom doing a property deal, and they were talking about stuff, and he didn't understand the acronyms, didn't understand what they were saying. Came out and thought to himself, how am I going to survive? I don't know what I'm talking about here. So he then went off to Harvard and got a law degree. Now, if you talk to him, he won't ever tell you that he's got a law degree. This is the only time that I've ever been able to find out that he had a law degree was during this story, because he doesn't want to use it. He doesn't want to acknowledge that he's got it. It's just a part of his toolkit that he has in the background so that he could understand the language of the
I
lawyers.
love it. I
But he
love it.
has a law degree, just between you and I and the viewers. Well, Alex, this is M&A Lessons from the Trenches. I think we could talk about the trenches forever on this podcast,
I
but
know we
we've got to
could.
let the viewers go. Thank you so much for coming on board. Really appreciate it. And all your details will be at the end of this podcast, as always, so people can look you up for the fractional general counsel services, for all of your services. Thoroughly encourage people to give you a call, have a chat, find
What
out
a pleasure. What a
what
I
what they're
love
missing out
to
on.
have a chat. Yeah, always. And again, that part of it is just so important. It's got to be a conversation. There has to be relational alignment, and I'm very selective with the OGC, but man, I love those relationships. They're real life altering relationships. So thank you, Craig, and what a pleasure. 6 in the morning for you, and seem completely sprightly.
It's all good. It's the value that my guests contribute that's most important. So thank you very much, Alex. We shall finish the podcast here.
All right, all right. I hope you have a good rest.
Well,